Through Weight Loss by Hers, you can give yourself something to be excited about in 2025. You can spend the new year in control of your weight by losing up to an average of 9 pounds in your first month. This is based on data that real Hers customers have reported based on their personalized compounded GLP-1 treatment plans. Hers is transforming women's healthcare by providing access to affordable weight loss treatment plans, delivered straight to your door if prescribed. Hers offers a holistic weight loss program with personalized solutions, including compounded GLP-1 weekly injections, featuring the same active ingredient as Ozempic and Wegovy or oral medication kits. So if you've been struggling with your weight loss journey, it's time for you to find the best option that works for you through Hers. Start your initial free online visit today at forhers.com/KKC. That's FORHERS.com/KKC for your personalized weight loss treatment options. forhers.com/KKC. Hers weight loss is not available everywhere. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Restrictions apply. Wegovy and Ozempic are not compounded. Actual price depends on product and plan purchased.
Designed for working professionals, Georgetown's Executive MBA features a hybrid format that delivers community on campus and convenience at home. Classes are held in person 1 weekend per month on our Washington, D.C. campus and 1 Saturday per month online, helping you balance work, life, and career advancement. Plus, you'll have the opportunity to participate in an international consulting project abroad with a global client. You'll get to choose from a variety of electives to customize your curriculum based on your interests and career goals. And enjoy the access only Georgetown provides in D.C., with connections to industry experts, global leaders, and influential institutions. It's time to expand your understanding of how globalization shapes both global and local business strategy. Ready to build your legacy as a business leader? Earn Georgetown's Executive MBA. Explore the program at msb.georgetown.edu/EMBA-podcast.
The amazing Kate Casey.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey, and welcome back for this Reality Life with Kate Casey book club selection special episode with author J. Randy Taraborrelli. He is the author of The Hiltons, The True Story of an American Dynasty. Most of you are familiar with the names Paris, Nicky, or Kathy Hilton, and I'm sure that all of you are familiar with the name Hilton Hotels. Well, this is about the story about the family behind the name. Conrad Hilton, the patriarch, was born on Christmas Day in 1887. He took over his father's general store at the age of 21 and served in the New Mexico state legislature. After fighting in World War I, he bought the Mobley Hotel in Cisco, Texas, and he grew it into a hotel empire. He formed the Hilton Hotels Corporation in 1946 and expanded his operations outside of the U.S. Properties in his hotel chain include the famed Waldorf Astoria in New York City, which he leased in 1949. And around that time, he began to expand his operations outside of the U.S. and rename the company. The Hilton International Company became one of the largest hotel businesses in the entire world. The company expanded its operations into credit cards, car rentals, and other services. He passed the reins of the company to his son Barron in the 1960s, but he stayed on as the chairman of the board. He was married 3 times and had 3 sons: Conrad Nicholson Jr., Nicky, William Barron, and Eric Michael, with his first wife, Mary Barron. The couple married in 1925 and divorced 9 years later. And in 1942, he married Hungarian actress Zsa Zsa Gabor, and together they had a daughter named Francesca. That marriage ended in 1946. And 30 years later, he married Mary Frances Kelly. Conrad Hilton died in January of 1979. He also established the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation that has awarded more than $3.2 billion in grants, including nearly $270 million in 2023. The foundation invests in strategic initiatives and fosters international partnerships, ensuring a lasting and measurable impact on global humanitarian efforts. The book is a sweeping saga of the success and excess of an iconic American family. Demanding and enigmatic, patriarch Conrad Hilton's visionary ideas and unyielding will established the mode for the modern luxury hotel industry. But outside of the boardroom, he struggled with emotional detachment, failed marriages, and conflicted Catholicism. And then there were his children. Playboy Nicky Hilton's tragic alcoholism and marriage to Elizabeth Taylor was the stuff of tabloid legend. Barron Hilton, on the other hand, deftly handled his father's legacy, carrying the Hilton brand triumphantly into the new millennium. Eric, raised apart from his older brothers, accepted his supporting role in the Hilton dynasty with calm and quiet at stark contrast to the boy's much younger half-sister Francesca, whose battle for recognition led her into courtrooms and conflict. The cast of supporting players includes the inimitable Zsa Zsa Gabor, who was married to Conrad briefly and remained a thorn in his side for decades, and a host of other Hollywood and business luminaries with whom the Hiltons crossed paths and swords over the years. Conrad's son Barron, the second son and successor of the hotelier, married Marilyn June Hawley in 1947, and they remained married until she died in 2004, and they had 8 children. Included in those children, Richard Rick Hilton, husband of Kathy Hilton. Barron Hilton had 15 grandchildren, including Rick Hilton's daughters, Paris and Nicky Hilton, and 4 great-grandchildren. So again, this is the sweeping saga of the success and excess of an iconic American family. My guest is J. Randy Taraborrelli. He is the author of The Hiltons, The True Story of an American Dynasty. Here is my interview with the author. J. Randy Taraborrelli is back. I mean, your books, they are the best kind of like tuck away into a corner and don't talk to me for a couple hours kind of book. I feel like it's like doing a swan dive into the most amazing like ocean. It is absolutely the best reading experience. And I'm so grateful that you're back to talk to me about another great book. And everybody's been very excited about this one, The Hiltons, The True Story of an American Dynasty. I think it's so important to go back and look at origin stories in order to better understand people in our modern era. So first of all, welcome back to the show.
Oh, it's good to be back. It's good to see you. And thank you for reading my books. You know, I just really appreciate it. Anytime anybody stays up nights reading my books, I mean, that's just the greatest compliment. So thank you for that.
Well, I know how much work you put into these books. You do extensive interviews. This literally looks like a Bible. It's gigantic. How long did it take you to write this book?
That was a really complicated book. It took 3 years. And the reason it was so complicated was because I knew nothing about the Hiltons. I mean, I knew nothing about it, and my research team knew nothing about the Hiltons. In fact, on one of our first team meetings about that book, a guy who had just started working for me came to me with a manila envelope, and he said, okay, this is what our book is about. It's about Conrad Hilton. And he pulled a picture out of the envelope, and it was Conrad Bain from Different Strokes.
No, you better stop it.
And I was like, dude, we are in such trouble.
Different strokes. It takes, wow, that's really
We're in
funny.
such trouble. If this is where we start, we're in trouble. So there was a huge learning curve. It's one of the few books that was actually not my idea. And my publisher at that time said, what we want is we want the Waldorf Astoria on the cover of a book with the name Hilton and J. Randy Taraborrelli. That's what we want. Now, how you come to that is up to you, they told me. They had the cover in mind. I needed to write the book that was going to be around the cover. And the only thing I knew for sure was that I didn't want it to be a book about Paris Hilton because that was just so obvious. And I just wasn't,
right.
I didn't want to write it. I mean, I love Paris Hilton and have interviewed her, and she's always been a great interview, but I didn't want to do a book about Paris Hilton. So I said, fine, let me just try to figure out who these people are. And it turned out that these characters are so great. Mm-hmm. You know, Conrad Hilton, who started the Hilton Enterprise business, his 3 sons, Barron, Nicky, and Eric, who are so great. And I had a chance to interview Eric many times, and it was so great. Zsa Zsa Gabor, Conrad's wife. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. Elizabeth Taylor, Nicky's wife. It doesn't get better than that. I mean, we were able to put Zsa Zsa Gabor and Elizabeth Taylor on the cover of the book. And anytime you get Zsa Zsa Gabor and Elizabeth Taylor on the cover of a book, that's
winning.
Genius, you know. So it turned out to be a great, great book. And I'm really, you know, I mean, I love that book and I loved every second of writing it.
So this really does trace the path of Conrad Hilton's childhood home in San Antonio, New Mexico, to the Beverly Hills mansion of Paris Hilton. Like, we are getting a full scope. You write in the book, as of December 31st, 2011, the assets of the Conrad Hilton Foundation were approximately $2 billion. Probably more than Conrad Hilton had ever imagined making in his lifetime. After all, almost 100 years ago, he was a man with just $5,000 to his name, all of which he decided to use to purchase the ramshackle Mobley Hotel in Cisco, Texas. If not for the help of his devoted mother and an assortment of friends, he never would have been able to put together the balance of $40,000 purchase price. And from there, his empire grew not only in this country, but around the world. His is a true, genuine American success story, or as his son Barron once proudly put it, it's definitely one for the record books. And not a day goes by that I don't sit and marvel at what my father did with his life. It is my hope that others are inspired by my father's story. So will you do us the favor and just putting into perspective where Conrad Hilton began and what he was able to accomplish?
Well, you know, as you say, he started with nothing. You know, his family owned a general store in New Mexico, and it was just sort of like a five and dime kind of ramshackle. I mean, the building. I think there might be a picture of it in one of the editions of the books. I mean, it's just like a ramshackle building. And when Conrad was a teenager, he had the idea of, you know, what if we turn this place into sort of a boarding house or a motel, you know, or a stopover point for travelers, you know, in their covered wagons and horses as they're going through town. And he convinced his father, you know, that this might be a money-making idea for them. And so one of his sisters would, you know, they put aside 4 rooms, and one of his sisters would clean the rooms, and his mother would make meals, and his father was working, you know, the front desk. And, you know, the family kind of got together to turn this idea into a reality. And the next thing you know, they had this sort of little motel. And he actually took that foundation of this little motel and was able to borrow money from his mom and from other people, and eventually was able to build a bigger motel, and then another one, and then a hotel. And with the passing of, you know, 20, 30 years, you have the greatest hotel brand in American history, you know, the Hilton brand. And if ever there is the notion of the American dream of truly starting from nothing. I mean, you know, like you hear people say, I started from nothing, you know, but often they've had like a couple of $1 million, you know, to start with, right? Like starting from nothing is when you really don't have anything. And these folks really, if you look at the pictures in the book, you see that this is not glamour. You know, this is dusty, dirty, you know, terrible accommodations that he built and sort of imagined as something that's so much better and more incredible. A place where stars went to the openings of his hotels. He had press junkets. He was the guy who invented the idea of press junkets. Before Conrad Hilton, there was not such a thing as a press junket. You know, the press junket being that celebrities would go someplace and be interviewed by the media. And show business in the film world, you know, the celebrities get together and talk about their movies to sort of a parade of reporters who come through, and each reporter gets like 10 minutes with the celebrity, and then the next reporter gets 10 minutes, and this is like an all-day thing. That's the press junket. In Conrad Hilton's world, the press junket was that anytime a hotel opened anywhere in the world, he would fly a plane load of celebrities on his own dime to this hotel, whether it was in Egypt or in Paris or wherever it was, and there would be a plane would follow with all of their luggage and their suitcases and all the stuff that these celebrities were bringing with them, to this junket. And all these celebrities would get together at the opening of this hotel and pose for pictures, and it would become such a big event that the opening of the hotel would end up on the front page of all the newspapers around the world.
Brilliant.
And so the opening of a Hilton hotel anywhere in the world became like a major event in the 1950s. And that was something that Zsa Zsa Gabor had the idea. It was actually Zsa Zsa's idea that what we should do if you really want to get attention, and what we should do is fly, all kinds of stars to these openings, and that's how you get attention. And he did it, and she was brilliant in that way. I mean, Zsa Zsa Gabor is mastermind when it came to show business and how to leverage celebrity.
Well, also when you think about then, movie stars were not accessible at all. I mean, we live in a different time where everyone has their own Instagram account and they're taking pictures in their kitchen. To get access to even see a photo of a movie star in the wild, I mean, that was something. So very ingenious. And I wonder if there were other women that were around Conrad that may not have gotten the accolades or the attention that they may have deserved, privately giving him counsel or advice, etc.
Well, he had his first wife, Mary, which was not a good marriage, and it was weak, and it was a weak marriage, and she was an interesting person, and I wrote a lot about Mary in the book. But the real truth of it is that Zsa Zsa Gabor was the one, in the sense that they were only married technically for about 4 years, but then he didn't remarry for 40 years. Yeah. So she was always like there was 40 years between his second wife, Zsa Zsa, and his third wife. And so for that entire time, she was the wife. I mean, she was, the sort of like the wife apparent, right? Mm-hmm. And then they had a child together, Francesca. So that further immersed her in his world, because then he was connected to her through their child. And I love that relationship. And I wrote a lot. I mean, I spent hundreds of pages on Conrad and Zsa Zsa, because it's not just a passing thing. I mean, even though they were only married for 4 years, and she's in his life for the entire book. And I was so happy about that, because when I started the book, I was like, wow, this is such a great character. I hate the idea that she's only going to be in the story for a few years. But then as I got into it, I realized, no, she's all the way to the end. She and Francesca contest the will.
Yes.
Conrad's will, which is, way at the end of, I mean, he's dead and she's still in the book. Right. So, and I had a chance to interview Zsa Zsa Gabor back in the 1980s, which was like, super cool. And, so I hope that people get to know her through this book. A lot of people today don't know who she is. And if you don't, you should go to YouTube and look up her, her videos. And she's a great sort of comedic personality.
Very funny.
Not an actress. More, actually, as I wrote in the book, she was like the original Paris Hilton.
She was an original personality. Someone who kind of leapt off any sort of screen. Incredibly beautiful, one of several sisters. Just an interesting personal story and iconic. And listen, the term icon is severely overused in our current media landscape. But truly, she had an iconic look, iconic voice. I certainly think she stands up in time as one of the women of that era that were most well known.
Well, yes, I agree with you. And she's self-invented.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I love about her, is that she's self-invented. She created a persona that was partially based on who she really was, but also sort of an exaggeration of who she really was. She had no help. Conrad didn't help her at all in terms of show business aspirations. She put herself out there, and she, sort of masterminded the Zsa Zsa Gabor brand in the same way that Paris Hilton, which would be like her great granddaughter, I guess. I can't remember. I wrote it. I can't remember how that. Her great step granddaughter, I think, would be the way to put it. In the same way that Paris did it, except for the fact that Paris had money behind her, whereas Zsa Zsa really did not. Zsa Zsa just has Zsa Zsa.
Right. And the name, nonetheless, right? Just like
well, what a great name. Mm-hmm. What a great name.
Now, you say that Conrad was emotionally detached. Of course, there's these 3 failed marriages. He was emotionally detached and conflicted on his Catholicism. What could you tell me about like his personality profile?
Well, you're right. I mean, he's a complicated man in the sense that he put everything he had into the hotel business. And this was the complaint that his first wife, Mary, had, and ultimately the complaint that Zsa Zsa had. By the time he married his third wife, he was, elderly and retired from the hotel business. But those 2 wives both agreed, that he was obsessively religious. He had an altar in his bedroom in which he used to pray at this altar in his bedroom.
Can you imagine sleeping in a room with an altar? That's a buzzkill.
Yeah, it's a buzzkill, right? And he used to refer to his hotels as his women. She's a great hotel. She's a great lady, that one. Like his hotels were his women. He wasn't like, he wasn't like a sexual guy or like a playboy. What I really loved is the fact that he was jealous of his son, Nicky. And I say jealous, I don't mean, he was envious of the fact that his son, Nicky, was what he always wished he was. He
had swag.
Been. Yeah. Nicky was a playboy. He had women. He had Elizabeth Taylor. He had Natalie Wood. He had all Nicky Hilton, the son, the oldest son, who was named after Conrad. It was Conrad Nicholson Hilton, Nicky Hilton, was the kind of guy that Conrad always wished he could have been, because Conrad didn't have a lot of women. He didn't really want them. He wasn't that guy. Nicky was that guy. And Conrad would sometimes look at Nicky and think to himself, wow, if I could have only been, had his life as a young man, how much fun that would have been. Of course, the problem with Nicky is that, he was not motivated and he was not driven and he was not, he was a lot of things that Conrad wished Nicky could have been, but he did have a lot more fun than Conrad ever had. That's for sure.
It almost seems like in modern times, Nicky would have been considered like an influencer, like someone you'd follow on social media because they would have an over-the-top lifestyle, extremely good-looking, beautiful girlfriends and wives. But on the other side of that, it seemed like he had quite a bit of rage issues, addiction issues as well.
He did. He had addiction issues. And I had the great opportunity to spend a lot of time with his second wife, Trish. And he was only married twice, Elizabeth and Trish. And, so she was able to give me, she really painted a picture of him. And I love Nicky, and I tried to really sort of flesh him out as a real person because he had he did have a lot of issues and addictions and, but the thing about Nicky is that, being named after Conrad Hilton was never, it was sort of like the same situation with Frank Sinatra Jr.
Yes.
It's really hard to live up to that persona when that persona is your father. And Conrad was so much more than just a hotel guy. He was, at that time, he was all about democracy, and he was on the covers of Time magazine and Newsweek, and he was about America, and he was about, the promise of America. I mean, it was not just hotels. People really looked up to Conrad Hilton as a symbol of American democracy and success and everything that America was all about during this time, during and after the Cold War. And then, Conrad had this beautiful, fantastic wife, Zsa Zsa Gabor. And I mean, Conrad seemed like he had it all, and Nicky felt like he didn't have anything. And so he went way on to the other side to try to impress people and try to be, that guy. And you're right, he would have been a pretty great influencer, because he did have style and he did have taste. And I just think that he was a really great person. And I actually was sorry when he died, when I wrote that book. I was sorry to see him go, because I just thought I really kind of got to love Nicky.
Do you feel like life is completely out of control? And do you feel that way because you spend all day looking at the internet? Do you see things in your various feeds and apps that are terrifying and or enraging? And do you often wonder if those things are even real in the first place? Well, I'm here to help. Sort of. My name is Ryan Broderick. I'm a journalist. I cover internet culture and technology. I write a newsletter called Garbage Day, and I have a brand new podcast called Panic World. Whether it's a moral panic about teenagers boiling chicken in NyQuil and posting it to TikTok, or teenagers vaping Tide Pods, or Taylor Swift being a government psyop, all of these conspiracy theories and more get put under the microscope on Panic World. I don't have solutions, but on my podcast, Panic World, we can definitely, we can laugh about it for sure. Listen to Panic World. It's a great show. I love it, and I love you for listening to it. Panic World is available on all apps. Just type in Panic World into the box that those various interfaces have. Panic World. Listen to it. It's good.
Each morning, it's a new opportunity, a chance to start fresh. Up First from NPR makes each morning an opportunity to learn and to understand. Choose to join the world every morning with Up First, a podcast that hands you everything going on across the globe and down the street, all in 15 minutes or less. Start your day informed and anew with Up First by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts.
That's also the beauty of kind of unraveling a story, is that you could take any very wealthy family, or you could take a family that has a family business in a smaller part of the country with less money. But it's true for both cases that family businesses or family wealth is very complicated. And the more that you kind of pick away, you realize that even in the case of Conrad, you said he admired aspects of Nicky, and I'm sure Nicky admired parts of his father, but they both seem to be lacking the things that they admired in the other person.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And then you had Barron, who was really a chip off the old Conrad Hilton block, the second son. Yeah. Barron was like everything that Conrad wanted in a son in terms of business acumen, and in terms of motivation and inspiration. He got with Barron, who then went on to run the company. But as I wrote in the book, there's a point in the book which was devastating, when Barron and Conrad teamed up, to get rid of Nicky, to move Nicky out. And I don't remember all the details right now sitting here. It's funny, because I wrote that book maybe 15 years ago, and I've written so many books since then. And I can't remember the details of anything that I write that long ago. But I do remember Trish Hilton telling me that she and Nicky were in an airport, and they picked up a copy of Time magazine, and in it and that's when they discovered that Barron and Conrad had teamed up to move Nicky out of the business. Nicky and Trish had gone someplace to open one of the Hilton hotels in this particular country. And the reason Conrad had sent Nicky and Trish to this country to open a hotel was to get them out of America long enough for him and Barron to put together a plan to move Nicky out of the company. So it's what it is. I mean, the reason they did it was because Nicky was, not good at his job. And they gave him a lot of opportunities and a lot of chances, and he kept blowing them, and he kept showing up drunk, and he kept having drug problems, and he kept being the guy that they didn't want running the company, right? So it's not like they didn't have a good. They had good reason to move him out, but the way that they did it was brutal. Yeah.
Now there's this other brother, and he's raised apart from his older brothers. So talk to me a little bit about Eric.
I love Eric. I spent lots and lots of time with Eric. And wow, Eric was not raised with Barron and Nicky. He was in the divorce, in Conrad's divorce from Mary. It was decided that she gets Eric and he gets Barron and Nicky, which is crazy. Except for the fact that you have to understand that Conrad came to suspect that Eric was not his child.
Yikes.
And Mary was having an affair with a football player.
Oh, man.
And to tell you the truth, Eric looks just like him. And so, I mean, I think there are pictures in the book of the football player whose name was Max Saxon and Eric side by side. They're like a spitting image, right?
Yeah.
So Conrad didn't think that Eric was his, and so he had Mary raise Eric. And then when Eric was about 19, Eric wanted to work for the Hilton organization, and Conrad brought him in and started him at the bottom, like as a janitor. And then Eric worked his way up the ladder, and they really came to accept him as a Hilton, because the thing about it, Francesca had the same story as Zsa Zsa's daughter. Conrad also wasn't sure that she was his daughter as well. And I think the reason for all this is that back in the 1940s, it was much more difficult than it is today. They didn't have the paternity tests, and they didn't have DNA, and a woman said that was your child. You kind of had to believe her unless you could really prove otherwise, Yeah. And they could have probably Conrad could have probably really gone on the mat with Mary and Zsa Zsa over Eric and Francesca, except for the fact that he was so concerned about his own image as a devout Catholic,
right?
And as this guy, that America loved as patriot, and this person on the cover of Time magazine, that he didn't want the scandal of the two children that were not his, that were born by his wives, right? Mm-hmm. So he decided to just, let it go, but it did wear on him. And as you read in the book, and especially in the case of Francesca, this was an issue all the way to his death. And there are letters that I reprinted in the book of him telling people, his lawyers and his assistants, when I die, you got to make sure that people know that she is not my daughter. Like, he claimed her as his own while he was alive, but he said he did it because he did it for her, he said. But
like, I don't want to humiliate you, but when it comes down to being fair, you are not an actual biological child. I mean, that sounds like that was his mindset at the time. Now, in modern era, we're like,
because then he gave her $100,000 out of his billions.
Yeah.
And when he died, he gave Eric 750, I think, which was nothing, compared to this $1 billion empire. And he gave these two offspring that he was never really sure about. So little money that Francesca went to court to fight the $100,000 that she got, knowing full well that if she lost, she wasn't going to even get the $100,000. Right? It was written in the will that if anybody contests this will, you're not going to get the little bit of money that you're fighting for if you lose. And she did ultimately lose, and so she didn't get the $100,000 at all. Right? But he was a tough. I mean, it was a really complicated, tough person. And Francesca told me, look, if you live your whole life with this man saying calling you your daughter and writing you letters and signing them "Love Daddy,"
yeah,
then you kind of believe that that's your father. And then when you find out later in life that he's not really sure and he doesn't really believe it, it's hard, She had a hard life, Francesca, and I really grew to love her too. Talking about these people makes me really kind of nostalgic for this book, to be honest with you.
So did they ever get any clear evidence that Eric and Francesca were his biological children?
They did not. But they also did not get clear evidence that they weren't. So as far as they're concerned, as far as both of them I talked to, as far as they were both concerned, they were his. Mm-hmm. Nobody ever proved otherwise, But the circumstantial evidence proved otherwise because Zsa Zsa, I can't remember the exact timeline, but it's in the book. But she and Conrad were separated when Francesca was conceived. And Conrad's position was, we were never together. And Zsa Zsa's position was, yes, we did have that one night at the Plaza Hotel. You don't remember. And he's like, I would remember that. And she's like, no, we had that one night, right? And so it's, what can I say? I mean,
it's so hard for us to imagine in the time of like 23andMe and Ancestry DNA tests. It makes it so much easier. But truly, at that time, you could have said, this is your child, and it was pretty difficult situation.
1940, the 1940s. This is your kid, and no, it's not. Yes, it is. And he said, she said, and then depending on how far you wanted to push it, it just never was resolved.
Well, do you remember the story of Loretta Lynn and Clark Gable?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they worked together on two different films. The first film, shortly thereafter, she leaves the country. And then a photo emerges of her like in all these blankets. And she said she went through a medical situation, but she was well now. What in fact had happened was she was pregnant and she had the child out of the country. She, along with her mother and her sisters, concocted this plan where the child would be put into like orphanages and other sort of situations for 18 months. And then she would claim that she adopted a child. That child was actually her child with Clark Gable. And on the second film that they worked together, Clark Gable came to the set and visited with the daughter, Judy, named after St. Jude, the patron saint of uncomfortable circumstances. And then the niece of Loretta Lynn said that Loretta Young, once I pass away, you can tell, I have to pass away and Judy has to pass away in order to tell the truth. And what the truth was that she said that Clark had actually raped her. So she was a devout Catholic actress at a time where should you have a child, let alone a child out of considered wedlock, that would have been the end of her career. So that was kind of the story that they concocted and how she was able to be with her child.
That's amazing. I can't understand how I don't know this.
Yeah, kind of amazing, huh? But I would assume a lot of stories are like that in the time.
Yeah, that's really something,
Yeah.
I mean...
Oh, and by the way, the child, Judy, looked identical to Clark Gable.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, like I said, Eric looked identical to this guy, this football player, Mac, that Mary was with. But Mary just, I think that there was also, I think what also came to bear is the fact that Mary wanted Eric to be able to partake in the Hilton fortune.
Yeah.
And so she wasn't going to ever admit, that Eric wasn't Conrad's son. And she never did. And she went to her grave insisting that Eric was Conrad's son, And when I talked to Eric, he was not open to the idea that maybe he wasn't.
Wow.
Francesca was more open to, like, who the heck knows? I only know what I was told, and she believed Conrad was her father, but she was open to discussion about maybe that wasn't the case because she knew her mother well, and her mother was it was not beyond Zsa Zsa Gabor to lie about this, right?
And did you get a sense from the family that whether or not they thought Francesca was an actual biological child?
Well, you know what? When Francesca died, they weren't even going to have a funeral for her. I mean, they were just going to just have some kind of. And I actually wrote to Paris Hilton's father, right? And I said, you cannot do this. Like this, you must, the nerve of me to do this. This just shows you the presumption that I should have any influence in this whatsoever.
Right.
It's the audacity of this is unbelievable, even as I'm telling it to you. But I was I felt like she had such a hard life, and I just felt like it was wrong. That her name was Francesca Hilton, whatever the circumstances, who knows, but her name was Francesca Hilton, and she was Conrad Hilton's daughter. And if she wasn't, he should have made that more clear in her life, right? So that I just felt like she deserved a funeral, like a really big funeral. And guess what? They gave her one, right?
Well, there you go. You did have influence. But you know what? Studying that family for the amount of time that I have, I can tell you part of that is Kathy and Rick seem to be very strong in terms of keeping family issues private. I mean, Kathy still gets frustrated when her own sister talks about their birth mother. So what I can remember Francesca was, she was a bit of a talker and willing to talk about things that they may have wanted to keep private, and that maybe have been part of the struggle.
Sure, no doubt about it. I just felt like she deserved to have a good,
as good everyone family. Does. Sure.
And I didn't. And when I found out that she was, and by the way, I was not invited to the funeral. So,
oh, I'm sorry,
but I just felt like she deserved to have one. And I don't know. That's the thing about me with I become very emotionally attached to my subjects. I do. And I become very protective of them. I'm so protective of Janet Auchincloss, Jackie's mom, and Hugh and Jamie Auchincloss. I mean, I'm very, very invested in these people, and I think that that's why my readers enjoy my books, because they know that I really, truly do care about these people. Like, I cannot write a book about somebody that I don't really admire. I just couldn't do it because it's just too hard. The process is already hard enough, but to write about and invest all of my energy and my affection and respect and everything that I put into a book, to invest all that into somebody that I don't like, it would just never work, And so I become it's really sometimes a little bit overwhelming because I can't let it go when I start the next book. But luckily for me, the most recent books have all been about the same people.
Yeah, that's just the story continues on. And you do a great job of really highlighting the complexities in each person. And I think it's important too, and to go back in time and relook at a lot of the stories that we can, because then you factor in the family circumstances, the time in which they lived, politics, media, all of those factors. I think it helps shift the way that we look through people as time goes on. And I think certainly with the success of Paris Hilton, you start to re-look at some of the relatives and the relationships, because all of those relationships had a hand in her success as well. So I think you do a great job of humanizing them. And that's certainly something that we should all do when we kind of look at some of these very famous families. And sure, they have all of the money and the opportunity that we could only imagine, but they're still, humans.
Well, thank you for saying that. That's my I feel like my job as a biographer is I always say that, where I land is I want to know and be able to report what these people were probably thinking about when they're in bed at night by themselves and their eyes are closed.
The quiet of the night, as I would say.
That's the thing for me. Like what's going through their head in that moment. If I can sort of get to the essence of those thoughts, then I think that, I'm able to do my job at its best. And also what's important to me is for my readers to be able to see themselves and their experiences in those people. Because if you can take somebody like, Zsa Zsa Gabor and Elizabeth Taylor, Grace Kelly, Jackie Kennedy, Michael Jackson, people who seem to be on another level.
Otherworldly.
Otherworldly. And if you can make those people relatable, if you can have a reader say, I totally get that. Like that relationship between Jackie and her mother, I totally get that. Yeah. That's the same relationship I have with my mom, or that's the same relationship I have with my sister. Or, I understand those people so well because I have had that same experience. And when I'm able to show you the humanity of somebody like Jackie Kennedy, and have you relate to her when you never thought you could ever relate to Jackie Kennedy and on any level, then if I'm able to have you have that experience with her in common, whatever that might be, her mom, her sister, her husband, whatever it is, you're able to see yourself or your other family members in her experience. And that's what the books are really for. That's really what it's about. It's about being able to kind of share a human experience with somebody that you never imagined you'd ever have something in common with, right?
Truly.
Yeah.
Hello, ladies and germs, boys and girls. The Grinch is back again to ruin your Christmas season with Tis the Grinch Holiday Podcast. After last year, he's learned a thing or two about hosting, and he's ready to rant against Christmas cheer and roast his celebrity guests like chestnuts on an open fire. You can listen with the whole family as guest stars like John Hamm, Brittany Broski, and Danny DeVito try to persuade the mean old Grinch that there's a lot to love about the insufferable holiday season. But that's not all. Somebody stole all the children of Whoville's letters to Santa, and everybody thinks the Grinch is responsible. It's a real Whoville whodunit. Can Cindy Lou and Max help clear the Grinch's name? Grab your hot cocoa and cozy slippers to find out. Follow Tis the Grinch Holiday Podcast on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. Unlock weekly Christmas mystery bonus content and listen to every episode ad-free by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts.
They say Hollywood is where dreams are made, a seductive city where many flock to get rich, be adored, and capture America's heart. But when the spotlight turns off, fame, fortune, and lives can disappear in an instant. When TV producer Roy Radin was found dead in a canyon near LA in 1983, there were many questions surrounding his death. The last person seen with him was Lainey Jacobs, a seductive cocaine dealer who desperately wanted to be part of the Hollywood elite. Together, they were trying to break into the movie industry. But things took a dark turn when $1 million worth of cocaine and cash went missing. From Wondery comes a new season of the hit show Hollywood and Crime, The Cotton Club Murder. Follow Hollywood and Crime, The Cotton Club Murder on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can binge all episodes of The Cotton Club Murder early and ad-free right now by joining Wondery Plus.
So when we think in terms of now and the success that Paris has had, walk us through Barron, Rick, and Paris, because I think it's very important to note that Conrad did not want kids that kind of lived in excess. Like, it was important for him that they all kind of work themselves for their own successes.
Yeah, but and when you really think about it, even though Paris, had the support of her mom for a real big time in terms of helping to create Paris Hilton.
She did, yeah.
She did create. I mean, the two of them, mom and daughter, really created the Paris Hilton brand. I mean, it's not. The interesting thing is that according to sort of like the Hilton Trust, you're allowed to do anything you want to do with the Hilton name except open a hotel, right? That's you can do anything you want to do except you cannot open a hotel. In fact, when Nicky Hilton being Paris's, is that her sister, Nicky?
Nicky Hilton, the sister. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when she opened a hotel, she called it something like Nicky. Like she wasn't even allowed to call it a Hilton Hotel. I think she called it, you can check, it's in my book. I think she called it like the Nicky Hotel, and it went out of business. But my point is that there are a lot of cousins. As I wrote in this book, there are lots of cousins.
50 or more, you said. Yeah.
But we don't know any of them, right?
We don't. Mm-mm.
We know Paris, right? So that tells you something about her. That tells you, how creative she is and how imaginative she is and what a good businesswoman she is and who she is, that she was able to take the Hilton name and do something with it that her other 50 cousins were not able to do, right?
And also important to know that she was not an academic person. Like, school was very difficult for her. She's been very open about having ADHD. This is not someone who received a master's degree and worked as a corporate executive. This is someone who really, like you said with Zsa Zsa, built businesses based on her persona.
She's amazing. I mean, when I've interviewed her a couple of times, and I just thought, wow, she is a cut above. And she got such a bad sort of reputation, I guess, because of the show with what was the show was it Nicole Richie?
Well, Simple Life, which actually they just came back for sort of a reunion thing. I think what first troubles people is obviously there's a disconnect in terms of she grew up with excessive family success and opportunity. So it's hard for people to put themselves in her shoes. And she certainly had, periods of time where she seemingly was living like kind of a wild lifestyle. But as she's gotten older, I think she's become a lot more open about the reality of what her life has been, namely her experiences at a school that was essentially supposed to be for wayward kids, and they completely bamboozled her parents, and she was the victim of abuse. And she just had a piece of legislation passed. So I think over time, people are opening their hearts and minds to the fact that although she was born into incredible opportunity and wealth, that she has certainly had her life circumstances and has tried as best as she can to use that pain into a purpose. And she's married now and with 2 kids. I have to say, you have to watch Paris and Love, which is on Peacock, which has had 2 seasons and there's a 3rd coming out, because you really get to see more of her relationship with her mom, which is very, very complicated. And like you said, probably elements of it are very relatable to other people.
I will have to watch that. When I first interviewed her, long before I wrote the Hilton book, I was interviewing her because she had a record out called, I think it was called "The Stars Have Eyes." I think it was, and she had a recording career, and I interviewed her as a recording artist, and I really liked her records, and when I interviewed her, I really felt like she's underrated. Like she's got a lot. I mean, she's a lot smarter, and she's a lot bigger and better than what people at that time, thought that she was. And this is probably 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really glad to hear and to know that, she's being taken more seriously. I haven't been keeping up with her. But I did know that she wrote a book, and there were some harrowing aspects of. Did I read somewhere that she was actually like practically kidnapped from her bedroom by these people?
She was.
Yeah.
And while she was at this school, they would wake her up in the middle of the night. She was sexually assaulted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for people to look again in broad scope and just to see, now that you have that, you're armed with that information, you can see how someone's life kind of plays out. Obviously, there would be periods of time where you're trying to cope with the aftermath of that. So now you see her and she's probably like early 40s, maybe 43, 44. And now a mother, that becoming a mother would propel you to become, an advocate for all other children, given the life experiences that you had.
I think she's great. And I'm really happy for her, and I mean, I think that it's sort of a great addendum, to the Hilton story.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really happy to have had a chance to talk about this book because, I've been working on I wrote an amazing pilot for a TV series based on this book. And we've just been having such a hard time getting it off the ground. And I'm hoping next year that we do, because I wrote a great show and it's really good. And it's based on the book. And I think that, if we can get it on television, it's going to be a really successful series.
I'm certain of it. And I do think that fortunately, I think we're moving past the COVID era where a lot of networks were trying to recoup their losses. And now I think people are eager for more content. And I think the networks, fortunately, are looking for really interesting, cool stories. And again, I feel like going back in time and reevaluating the way someone was perceived in the media. Like, my last question really is about Conrad in terms of Mad Men, because he was portrayed on that show. Do you think that was an accurate portrayal of him?
I do. I thought, I know that they went to the Conrad Hilton Institute and they went through the library and they did their own research for that show. I thought it was pretty accurate. It didn't end the Mad Men arc did not have a nice ending for Conrad. If I recall, I mean, he was kind of a jerk at the end and just sort of like was very dismissive and not a nice person. But I do think that it portrayed his vision accurately, and his but also his sort of belief that everybody was. Like Don Draper would get these phone calls in the middle of the night, and Conrad would be up pacing and working and thinking, and he would say, I need to see you right now. And Conrad and Don Draper would have to, rush to the hotel to have a meeting with him, and at 4:00 in the morning. All that stuff really rang true to me. That's how driven Conrad Hilton was. I liked it a lot. I mean. I thought the guy that played Conrad was, kind of right on the money. And I think they were as respectful as they could be, but while at the same time trying to, create drama between him and Don Draper. And then, there was like a little mention of Zsa Zsa Gabor. He said something like, "This little woman I was once married to taught me this," know, I thought it was really, I liked it. I thought it gave him his due.
That's so interesting. Well, tell everybody in the book that you are going to come back to talk about, because you came back and you came on the show and you talked to me about Grace Kelly, and we of course did the episode about Jackie, which was such a page turner. I mean, I did not read the last 10 pages of that book. I put it on the bookshelf for a little bit because I didn't want it to end. It was that
Wow.
great. So you have a book that we were talking about earlier that I think we should talk about next, which begins the day of Jackie's funeral, correct?
Yeah. It's called The Kennedy Heirs. And it's the third generation of Kennedys. So it's John Kennedy, it's Carolyn Bessette, it's Ethel's children, it's lots of Ethel as a matriarch. It's Ted Kennedy and his kids. It's Cara Kennedy, his daughter who died of a brain tumor. Yeah. Well, actually, she had a heart attack, but she successfully survived a brain tumor and then had a heart attack. His daughter. It's an amazing cast of characters, of really interesting people who are flawed in some cases, brilliant in other cases. And it's just that whole generation. You know, it's JFK's kids. I did a deep dive into Carolyn, his sister's marriage. I mean, I wrote things in that book that people really never would have imagined. I wrote about her. Whoever would write about this except for me? I wrote about Caroline Kennedy's mother-in-law, right? Like, oh yeah. Who thinks about Caroline Kennedy's mother-in-law? Only this guy. I was like, what's it like to be Caroline Kennedy's mother-in-law? That, like, you know, and I wrote about her mother-in-law's relationship with Jackie, right? And the first time that they met and how they got off on the wrong foot.
I remember
the mother-in-law leaned into Jackie at their first time having lunch and said something like, "Oh, must have been awful, that whole assassination business."
Yeah.
Right?
They also thought her husband was a bit dorky.
Yes. Well, Jackie said, I don't know what he does. Like, what does he do? You know, Jackie was like so
very
confused.
Cerebral. Yeah. I remember being in college and reading like one of his political theory books. He wrote one. So yes, I can imagine that would be difficult.
Well, think about his parents, what they were like, you know, right. And that's what I wanted to do with that book. I mean, I wanted to do things that people really never, like, you know, you never really think about Caroline Kennedy having a mother-in-law. You think about the mom.
I know, but like if I were with her, that's the kind of stuff I'd talk to her about. I'm like, okay, tell me about your husband's parents. Did you like them? Or were you like, oh my God, if we have to spend Thanksgiving with them, I am going to slam my head against a wall.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do with that book. So I think you'll like it. It's called The Kennedy Heirs. It came out about maybe 6 years ago.
Can't wait.
And it's a good one. So check it out. And then, you know, I've got JFK coming out in July. And it's a killer, boy. It's a page turner. And you've never read a JFK book like this before. This is, I mean, I've read all the JFK books, believe me. I've been reading JFK books for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I decided if I can't do something totally different, I'm not going to do it. And this is totally different. This is a great, I mean, you love him, you hate him, you love him, you hate him, you know, like that's
kind of how I felt about Jackie when I read the book. I was like, oh, she's great. And then I was like, ooh, this is a doozy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the truth of most people. Like most people we know in our lives, like sometimes you're like, what are you doing, you idiot?
Yeah, that's it. You know, like it's a journey, you know? I don't think anybody is the same throughout there. Like people ask me all the time, what was Michael Jackson like? Like, what was Diana Ross like? What, you know, like people that, you know, ask me questions about the people that I've known in my lifetime. And I always tell them the same thing, which is when? Like, what were they like when? Because nobody is ever the same. You can't just say that Diana Ross was, you know, was a temperamental diva. She was in the 1960s and 70s, but she grew into something else. I mean, she's not that today. You know, like people are not the same throughout their entire lives. And and in my books, you'll see that most of my subjects are not the same at the end of the book that they were at the beginning. You know, most of them they go through peaks and valleys in their personality. You like them, you hate them. You like them, you hate them. You know, I mean, that's a real life, you know. And so when people say to me, what was Michael Jackson like? I always say, when? You know, I knew Michael Jackson I met him when he was like 10, you know. So, and I knew him until he was 50. So where in that period of time would you like me to talk to you about Michael Jackson? Because he certainly wasn't the same guy at 50 that he was at 10, right? So
well, I can tell you too, as a woman, when you have a child, you definitely, your whole brain chemistry changes after a child.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you have a child by birth or adopt, like you completely are different. Mm-hmm. You know, did you watch the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great to watch, but watch the unedited version, which is available on Disney Plus and Hulu.
Okay.
It's a bit of a time commitment, but a lot of the people that you have covered over the years, I'm sure, are getting awarded or are in the audience. But every single artist that received an award, I'm talking Cher, A Tribe Called Quest, Kool and the Gang, like just unbelievable artists. They all get to the award podium and not one of them said this was easy for me. It was like, we have been through it. We have been through it. And it just reminds you, like, success is not easy. It is not like an easy journey. And there are a ton of people that fall off on the sidelines because they can't keep up with the pace or there's some sort of hiccup. And for you to be truly successful in a business like the entertainment business, it requires an enormous amount of tenacity. That's what Cher kept saying. Everything you can imagine has happened to me. I have been kicked off record labels. I've been called too old. But she has had a number one hit over 7 decades.
I know,
Each decade
incredible.
she had a number one. And the thing she said was like, I never give up. And I'm like, yeah, we can all do that. We can all never give up.
I think so. I mean, when I wrote that was the lesson from my Beyonce book. You know, I mean, my Beyonce book is one of my favorite books and also my least successful book of all of my books.
Huh.
And I just don't know why I couldn't connect with that book. I think it's because her audience is just used to getting what they need from her about her from Instagram and TikTok, and her audience doesn't need a big, gigantic J. Randy Taraborrelli book. But I thought that they did, and so I gave them like the whole J. Randy treatment, and it is a fantastic book because the original people in her life were all women. Her first vocal coach was a woman. The women who discovered her, I interviewed them. The women who found her and formed the woman who formed a group around her, like all of the people who actually started, not to mention her mom, but the people at the foundation of Beyonce's life were all women, And I just thought that that's such a great story. And plus, being Beyonce was not easy, In fact, the book is called Becoming Beyonce, right? And then Michelle Obama stole my title, and she went with becoming Michelle. Yeah. And I was like, wait a second, Becoming Beyonce is the name of that book, and people should read it, because if you care at all about women and the power of women and the authority of women in show business, you really see it in Beyonce's story. It's really, it's something else. It really is great.
So where can people buy all of these great books? And I'm telling you guys, this is the weekend, this is the day, this is the week where you want a great book to tuck yourself into, like get a nice cup of coffee or tea, and you will be so happy.
Thank you. Anywhere books are sold, Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com, online, they're all, everything that I've written is out there and available online. You can buy anything on Amazon. The Kennedy heirs, Becoming Beyonce, the Hiltons, the Jackie, Public-Private Secret, they're all available. And then, JFK is coming out in July, and it's called JFK Public-Private Secret. It's the companion book. Oh my
God, I can't handle it.
It's a companion book to the Jackie book. It's like everything in the Jackie book was from her point of view, but everything in the JFK book is from his. And wow, wait till you find out what he was thinking during these episodes. It's very, very, it's very enlightening, And when you take the two books and put them together, you get a marriage, And so I think people are going to really enjoy it. It's coming out in July.
By the way, I just talked about a moment of that book, Jackie, Public-Private Secret, because we were talking about Maria Callas, and I talked about how you had said she had gone to Paris and was standing outside the building and saw her and never ended up saying anything to her. She's just looked across the street at her.
She just she wanted to, I mean, she intended to go in and they never met. It's unbelievable, and she was like, I need to meet this woman. And she intended to go there, but then she got cold feet and she was standing in front of the building and like pacing, there was a park across the street and she was trying to get up enough. Can you imagine Jackie Kennedy trying to get up enough nerve to meet this woman who Maria Callas was so in love with Aristotle Onassis, and he was so in love with her, and she was always in the picture. And Jackie was like, I need to meet this woman, right? And she went there and she just couldn't do it. And while she was trying to get up the strength, she saw Maria Callas come out of the apartment building, and she was, she had a scarf on and she had sunglasses, and Jackie was like, oh my God, she's me. Right. Yeah. Jackie was like, that's me. Like I identify with this woman. Like, how can I go up to her in the same way that I don't want anybody coming up to me?
No.
Right. Jackie was like, I just need to respect her privacy. She's me. And Jackie just watched her walk away. And that's as close as they ever got, to being together. And I thought that's amazing.
Can you imagine if there was somebody outside that witnessed this whole thing?
Yeah.
I mean, no one would believe it. Like, what did you see this week on the street and you tell somebody, they would never have believed it.
Yeah. And I loved it because I mean, that's how I felt when I met Jackie. I was like, this is Jackie. We talked about this. Jackie's secret weapon was that she was so accessible and she was so easy to talk to, and she would lean in and she would just be there for you, that you would never in a million years betray that trust by asking her any questions whatsoever about anything.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
You just wouldn't do it. And she trusted that you wouldn't do it, which is why she was so open. Like she was, the way she walked out in the streets in New York with no bodyguards. She's just walking the streets in New York City. The most famous woman in the world, walking the streets of New York City, being photographed by Ron Galella, just looking gorgeous, looking this way, looking that way, just walking down the street. No bodyguards. And more importantly, nobody coming up to her either. Like she was not swarmed by people. She wasn't mobbed by people. Everybody in New York knew that they respected her enough to let her just be. And what a rare thing that is in pop culture, Kidding. And I'm not quite sure that she'd be able to pull that off today, because maybe today we're just like so invested in and
everybody has a phone.
Yeah. I mean, maybe people would be taking pictures of her. They'd be on TMZ. Jackie went to the library. Jackie went to the radio. But back then, she was able to just move around and just be who she was. And I just think, it's interesting. These people, the way that they've been able to sort of exist in our culture is very different back then than it is today.
Well, again, thank you so much. And I'm so excited about the book. And I'm going to make everyone go read it so we can circle back and you can come back to headquarters and we can delve into it.
Yeah, let me know and I'll go back and read it a little bit. So I'm up to speed.
So you're up to speed. Yeah, exactly.
It's
like asking
to you
me
again.
about an episode I did, 5 years ago. I'd be like, wait, yeah. Right. So I got it. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I want to thank my great guest, J. Randy Taraborrelli. Make sure that you go and get a bunch of his books on Amazon. They are must reads. Make sure that you are subscribed to this podcast and leave a 5-star review. Also, make sure that you get my What to Watch list at katecasey.substack.com. Bonus episodes on my Patreon by going to patreon.com/KKC. And make sure that you follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at @KKCCA. TikTok, it's KKC, and Twitter and Threads at @KKC. Check back for an all-new episode tomorrow.